Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Garrett Hatchett of Public Administration, and I'm going to be teaching you about the bases of power that were created by John French and Bertram Raven. Before we get into it, it should be noted that John French and Bertram Raven, were two psychologists in 1959 that created the list of the original 5 bases of power. There was a 6th power that came much later that was added by Bertram Raven, and this was informational power. But I'll be going over the list in full. We will, of course, be going into informational power last because it was the last one to be added. But these power bases are as follows: legitimate, reward, coercive, referent, expert, and informational. Legitimate, reward, coercive, referent, expert are the ones that came first. These were the original 5 by the duo before informational came into play much later. But before we get into informational, let's start from the beginning. Legitimate power. Now, legitimate power is power that is given to someone legitimately. It is usually through an electoral system that you get this power, or I guess if you're looking for a more older age, the idea of being the divine right to rule. In many people's eyes, that was enough to make you have legitimate power. Now, legitimate power, of course, emphasizes the idea that it's legitimate. There's no falsity, there's no untruthfulness, no dishonesty to it. That's kind of why this power usually nowadays is done via voting or popularity, or it's usually a conglomerate of people who choose these kinds of leaders who get this kind of power, or they have to go through so much to get it, because it is power that is chosen and given to someone other than someone just saying, I have this power. No, that's not how it works. Legitimate power, the people who have it, an obvious example would be President Biden. He was elected and given this power. And people may not see it as legitimate, but in definition, it is legitimate power. He was voted in through a voting system, an honest voting system, and he was voted in. He's got legitimate power. It should be known that a lot of presidents do not have this power anymore. The formal one, former President Donald Trump does not have legitimate power anymore. He only has referent power, which we'll get into much later. But once you kind of lose, once you kind of have to step down, you no longer have legitimate power. And it should be known that in legitimate power, the idea is one person ruling over many, or having the ability to make decisions and demands and enforce them himself, with the others just kind of following. Because, you voted him in, or you gave him this power based on your idea of him. That's how it should be. So, just, when you think of legitimate power, think of a president, think of a governor, think of a mayor, think of a leader that is given power by the people or through other means. But they all have to be legitimate. Reward power. Reward power is an interesting case. It is usually with leaders who have the ability to actually, give out rewards. Rewards are usually given out to employees or individuals who are loyal, hardworking, good at their jobs, which of course we'll get into a example of reward power much later on. People can actually get expert power from reward power. But we'll get into that once more much later. Now, these leaders can be seen as charitable. It's also probably a power that we've all kind of seen before, even before we got into like a working career or a college career or anything like that. We've probably seen it when we were much younger. It's kind of like when you do something really good in school when you were little, or your parents, you did something really good, so you got a reward. Like you went to the dentist, you didn't like cry or kick the dentist, so you got a lollipop, or you took a shot and you were brave about it, so you got a lollipop. You did really good in class, so you got a ribbon or a medal because you were an honest student. That's kind of what it means by having reward power. You were rewarded for your compensation. And now it should be known that the opposite of this, of course, is coercive power, which we'll get into right after this one. But do note that reward power is probably the most favorited power base because, if your leader or boss has it, it means, he's got. We all like receiving things, let's be honest. But it's a very sought after one, but of course it's difficult, especially if the leader does not have the ability to do it. So, as I said before, coercive power. An example of this obviously would be a dictator, like Joseph Stalin, Kim Jong Un, of course, because in coercive power, their demands and their actions. Now, there are two sides to this. One, of course, is the obvious: do as I say, or you get punished, and the law is the law, and I will bring it down on you hard. That's the first one. The other one is do this or else. Now, of course, these sound similar, but the first one is more dictatoring. You don't have an option. You do it, or bad things happen to you. That's kind of how it was in a dictatorship. Their decisions and demands were put out there, and there was no arguing with it. It had to happen, or, well, the obvious one is you died. But in modern age, in the age where we don't live in dictatorships, well, at least here in the United States, coercive power kind of has a much different connotation. An obvious example is when you do something or mess up, or you're working slow at your job, or you're doing pretty slow on an assignment, we'll say. You have to kind of go through the proverbial ringer, because then your boss is going to have to come over here and he's going to tell you, hey, do it better or do it faster, or do your job, or I'm going to write you up, I'm going to dock your pay, I'm going to get rid of your benefits, or the more common one is you're going to be fired. You are threatened into cooperating. That's kind of what this power is. You are threatened into cooperating. And it's obviously seen as the most unpopular power base because of what it kind of has to deal with. People don't like to be threatened. People don't like to be punished. People don't like to be constantly, berated. So, of course, it's not going to be a very popular power. The next power is expert power. I talked about reward power not too long ago. The expert power can be gained via reward power. Like, for example, your boss or whoever's in charge of you can give you expert power via, well, a reward. Now, of course, it varies. You could just get it because you were his buddy. But, of course, if you got it via actual skill and knowledge, that's how you get this kind of power. It's probably the hardest basis to actually get because it takes skill, it takes knowledge, it takes a lot of dedication. But with it comes a respect from usually other leaders, those below you, or those even, on the same wavelength as you. You're seen as this expert in a field or a craft or a job. You're so good at it that of course you're going to get respect and power based on it. Like, if you walked into a welding shop and you saw a new guy and an old guy, and the old guy's been there for 3 decades, and he says, hey, do it this way, you're going to believe him over the new guy because, well, he's got more skill, he's got more experience. He's literally an expert. Of course he knows more than the guy who just showed up. It's that kind of power. It's kind of like, it's like veteran power. It's like expertise power, experience. And of course, an obvious example of an expert power would be, the people who are seen as natural-born leaders. Those kinds of people who get, like, Employee of the Month, a manager, or a foreman. Those people get their jobs based on skill and performance, and then in, retrospect, they get power from it. It's earned power. You don't just skim by and get expert power. Referent power. As I said earlier, Donald Trump is now referent power. And I might think, okay, well, what does referent power mean? Well, it is power that is gained based on a perception. Usually it's always positive, of course, but it can also be negative. But for this example, we're going to go positive, of course. So, Donald Trump, he's a prominent individual. People know his name. He's in TV. He's in the news. He's on radio occasionally. He's all over the internet. You type in his name, this face right here pops up. Because you know why? People know him. And people know him, he's famous. He's got influence, and sometimes he uses his influence knowingly, sometimes he doesn't. Most people in his situation do, not just former presidents, but people with referent power, such as celebrities. Celebrities have referent power. This is probably the easiest power to gain in retrospect, based on the idea that all it takes to get it is for a lot of people to have a viewpoint of you. For example, a lot of movies nowadays obviously have big name actors. Nicolas Cage, Jack Black, all those names. And in these names of celebrities and movie stars, whether they be for romance, action, comedy, when their faces and names pop up, people gravitate towards it. Because it has their name, just because it has has their name in the picture, that's what gravitates them towards it. It's that kind of power to influence people. People may not watch the movie otherwise. And that's the beauty of referent power. It's because that person's in it or he talked about it, that's why it's happening. That's why this is happening the way it is. And with Donald Trump, of course, one of his biggest perceptual skills is charisma. He can work a crowd. He knows how to get into the public's eye, and he's done a great job of that. He can influence a lot of people knowingly or unknowingly, because he's just such a popular, or at least a very prominent individual. He's literally a celebrity. Now, of course, viewpoints on him vary, but a lot of people, let's put it as an example. If he talked about gun control, abortion, or marijuana, people would reflect on that and say, well, he knows what he's talking about. He's popular. He's everywhere. I know that guy. I'm going to listen to him because he's a prominent person. It's a popularity contest with this kind of power, and it's also the easiest to get, is what I'm getting at. And now the last one. This was the 6th one that was added. And it was added by Bertram Raven single. It was only him who added this, and he put it down in 1965 on top of the Form 5 in the list of power bases. Informational power is actually the one that most of us in modern day have. Most people of all ages have some type of device to use to get information. Whether it be via a social media or just looking it up, you have information. And you even have the power to use that device to gain even more information by filling out forms online to get information you can't just look up. FOIA, people. Freedom of Information Act. But, it's a modern day thing. I mean, granted, back in 1965, I'm sure it was based on the idea that a lot of people could get stuff, a lot of information. Nowadays, I don't think Bertram Raven would understand the idea of a social media or a Twitter, but in this day and age, it is probably the easiest power, or honestly, probably the power everyone has. Due to the access of the internet, everyone has the internet. Now, some people may not have the internet. I'm gonna be real with you. Some people go off the grid. Some people don't want the internet in their house, but they still have a phone. They still have an ability to get information regardless, even if it's not a computer. But even without a computer, we also have information because a small town is tight-knit. They have all the information in the town because it's so widespread. And a computer with all of its information is just a bigger town. Everyone's not connected, sure, but if you want to know something, you know where to go. Now, of course, this kind of power is based around, as I said, having access to large amounts of information, which, of course, the internet's the best at, or just being very good at listening. I know a lot of the information can be good, bad. It can be used for good or bad, whether it be for blackmail. It could take down a company. It could do a lot. You could do a lot with informational power. Now, of course, it would vary on what you do with it. It could be good or for bad. But by the end of the day, it should be noted, as I said multiple times already, it's power that is easily gotten. It is power that most people have. I have it right now. I'm recording this on a computer. I could look up anything. I had to do research and information for this. I, in theory, have informational power. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize if I talked a bit too fast, or I didn't go into as much detail as some people wanted, or maybe too much detail. But if you want to know more about this in a more understanding term, look no further than this link. You're watching this on YouTube, I assume, because that's where I put it, or in the presentation department. So hey, there's copy and paste it in your search bar. Use that information power. All right, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. This has been Garrett Hatch at Public Administration.